I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The prayer for the day will be offered by the amazing delegate from Prince George's County. Let us bow our heads.
Gracious God, we come to you this afternoon thanking you and praising you, thinking and thinking about your amazing grace, the mercy that you have extended to each of us. We thank you for the change that is taking place at such a time as this. For our new speaker, Jocelyn Pena Milnick, we say thank you for all of the changes that we will make so that the people of Maryland will succeed, will not just survive, but will thrive. We pray for your grace, for your courage, for your peace, to walk with integrity, passion, and purpose as we do the work for your people. It is in your great name that we pray and we say,
Amen. Corin Cole.
Madam Speaker.
The clerk will call the roll. There being 126 members present, the House is in session. Petitions, memorials, and other papers. Senate Bill 587, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen, the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 587. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 587.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. Is there any question or debate? The Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
My pleasure.
This bill has tremendous import to many here in the chamber, and for valid reasons. I cannot imagine being in a position to feel as if my only existence and my history in this country is something that is wrapped up in the terrible, horrible legacy of slavery or the Jim Crow era. They are stains upon the greatness that America has been since its inception in 1776 until today. We have always strived to do better, and we have failed many times, but the sign of a great nation and a great people is not that they never make a mistake, it's how they address their mistakes. It's how they get up off of the floor and they strive and create a better country. And I think that it's important to recognize that the reason why the terrible stain of slavery is gone is not because of some biblical act, and it is not because of some act of a foreign power. It is because of the actions of the majority of the people of the United States of America, white and black at that time, who said enough is enough, and we will change the system, and we will fight the bloodiest conflicts that have ever been fought, and we will shed our blood and the blood of our brothers and sisters upon these grounds to change slavery. And the Jim Crow era did not end because of the act of a foreign power or because of some type of mystical underpinning that all of a sudden everybody woke up one day and it didn't exist. It changed because people of both political parties throughout the 1950s and 60s and 70s changed their perceptions, changed their perspectives, and they brought forth a better country where state-sponsored and state-recognized and state-supported racial and ethnic discrimination was no longer the law of the land and could not be the law of the land. There is a reason why we sit here today with African American, Dominican Republican, African American, with a wide variety of minority voices that exist here in the state of Maryland. It didn't happen by accident. It happened because we already changed the laws. We already changed the perspective of our country. And that is a very, 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 very good thing. The Reparations Commission, I think, elicits a difficult response from myself and others, and as it has throughout this country. Let's not fool ourselves. Again, as we talked about earlier this morning, we don't exist in a vacuum. Very, very few, if any, other states are doing this. It's not going to happen in Pennsylvania, although certainly individuals who live in Pennsylvania have historic legacies of suffering from state-sponsored discrimination. It's not going to happen in North Carolina. It's not going to happen in Ohio. It's not going to happen in Illinois. None of these things are going to happen, even though millions of people there have the exact same criterion for possible reparations relief as hundreds of thousands of people here. We're not going to do it. We're going to exist again to try to solve the evils of decades and centuries ago on a national scale with votes here on a very local scale, as if we can. And we can't. We can't. It feels good. It feels good. It feels like we've reached some type of zenith. It feels like there's a lot of activists that are happy, and it feels good. I can only imagine it feels good to have that form of recognition of the problem. But I want to say to all of you, I recognize the problem. Nobody's trying to suggest that what reparations was originally designed to discuss is not an issue. That's not what we're suggesting. But what we're suggesting is this. Do you need a commission to study something that's already been studied? The legacy of slavery in the United States of America and in Maryland has been studied. It has been studied by academics. It has been studied by economists. It has been studied by legal scholars for generations. Because thank God, it ended in the 1860s. And we're in the 2020s. So we've had 160 years of the end of that. And the horrible legacy of what certain Jim Crow laws done has been studied. I do not want anyone in this room to think that none of this has ever been studied, that it's just we're just starting from scratch here. We're not. It has been studied. It has been recognized as an evil. It has been documented. And so we don't really need to study it. What you need to decide to do is what you want to do about it. And that, I think, is where I can find some common ground with Governor Moore, who suggested I don't need to study it to find out that slavery had an impact historically upon families and businesses and legacies here in Maryland. I don't need to study it to find out that Jim Crow laws, redlining laws, and other had a historic, systemic legacy here in Maryland. Don't need to study it. It's been studied. It's been there. And I think we've done things. I think we should do things. I think we should have done things over the course of our history. Before any of us ever came to this room, people were doing things to address these problems. And I think that I share his concern that we have done things, we are doing things, and what a Reparations Commission, by definition, suggests is that we're going to do more. And that's the question. What does more mean? We opposed the bill because of the open-ended nature of more. Does it mean you're going to provide direct financial payments to people who can trace their ancestry to those who were horribly enslaved within Maryland's borders? We don't know. Does it mean that you're going to open up direct payments to individuals who don't live in Maryland or can't trace themselves to a Maryland-specific injury? Maybe perhaps they suffered the legacy of Jim Crow in Virginia or Pennsylvania or New York or Colorado, but they live here now. Are they going to get taxpayer dollars in return for reparations? We don't know. How much will it cost? We don't know. What will be the criterion for the possible reparation relief? We don't know. And I know that the answer will be, well, that's what the commission's going to figure out. I have more faith, quite frankly, in the people in this room. I don't know who's going to be on the commission. I don't know what their influences are going to be. I don't know what their recommendations are going to be. And I know one thing, they don't have to vote for millions and millions. And as California found out when they went down this process, it would turn into billions of financial commitments to meet the recommendations of the Reparations Commission that they put together. And you know what California's legislature, one of the very few legislatures that has a pretty similar makeup in this room between the parties, California's legislature decided, yeah, we can't afford that. Thanks for the Reparations Commission. Thanks for all the recommendations, but you didn't pay attention to how much it cost and what the effects were going to be. And when you came back to us, we couldn't vote for it. Can't support it, can't do it. Not financially feasible, will not work, not logical. I have trust and faith in the people, the faces I see in this room. If you want to do something with respect to reparations, then work on the bills, work on the legislation, get the fiscal analysis and decide what it is and allow people to come in and take up and down votes on what that means. Punting it to a commission that has very, very few guardrails, but an awful lot of momentum behind them to come up with a result that I do not think will ever be actually implemented. Maybe that's just me. I don't like telling people, man, we're doing something. We're going to take care of this. And then we come up with a recommendation from another blue ribbon commission, and then we don't actually do anything because we can't afford it, because it doesn't make sense, because it doesn't have the political support. I hope and trust that everyone in the room understands that by voting against this bill in no way suggests that there's not a valid conversation to be had about the divergence in our American experiences and how we make America a better place in the 21st century for ourselves and our progeny. A vote against this bill and to sustain the governor's veto simply suggests that this is unfortunately the wrong bill, the wrong approach, at the wrong time when our state has near record budget deficits for the wrong reasons. We can solve and we can work and we can talk together as Marylanders about these problems. But this particular solution is not going to get anyone in this room where they want to be next year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And as a result, I think we should adopt Governor Moore's position and sustain his veto. Thank you.
From Frederick and from Caroline County. Did I get it correct? Yes.
Buenas tardes, Madam Speaker.
Buenas tardes.
Thank you very much. I think it might have been the first time you've heard that on this floor. I stand up to sustain this veto based upon my historical analysis of this institution and the state of Maryland. I want to call everyone's attention to page 85 of the booklet we're supplied. Page 85, B2, reads as such: potential sources of funding, including fees paid by private businesses and organizations in the state that have benefited from the institution of slavery or inequitable government policies. Well, it's with heavy heart I state the mere fact that the majority party that runs this institution has been in charge of this institution since 1860. And only 6 years in that time has my party controlled this chamber, and only 2 has it controlled the chamber on the other side. I'm bringing attention to the wording of the bill because I'm warning this chamber of the potential Pandora's box that you will open up. Not only the legal melees that will hit this state and bog it down, even worse than the child sexual abuse law that we passed. It's not going to do anything to uplift us. And I want this body to understand that it's not going to take away from the guilt that this institution and the majority party has inflicted upon the African American community, and that there's better alternatives for us to solve the disenfranchisement of African Americans, especially when the political institution has dominated the state of Maryland is directly responsible for that injustice perpetrated against African Americans. So I want people to realize that if you override this veto, you know it'll cause a tremendous debt and legal burden upon the taxpayers of the state of Maryland. And I do not think in any way on the long term it's going to uplift anyone. What is most important for all of us, every last member of this institution, is to realize that guilt falls on all of us. Regardless of what party affiliation you belong to, tremendous injustice has been perpetrated against our friends and family throughout our history. And this bill is not going to erase that history, and it's not going to erase that guilt. But what will is for each and every one of us to admit that guilt and move forward and do everything we can to help those who have been disenfranchised in the past. And with that, I say God bless you all and have a Merry Christmas. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Recognizing the young men from St. Mary's County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
My pleasure.
I voted against this legislation. I stand to stand up for the veto here. Let's be clear what the civil rights movement was about. It was a promise to every future generation that our government would never again put one race above another. Civil rights movement was fundamentally a promise that the government created for the people, by the people, of the people, would treat all citizens equally. It was a unifying movement. And that's how I was raised, and that's how I've lived my life. But there's a lot of misconceptions about this bill, so I'd like to read you some text from the bill. On page 1, it says, individuals impacted by historical inequities means individuals having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. So we're talking about one race here, black Americans. And that's a very large group. It talks about ancestry back to slavery. We understand that, but it also incorporates a lot of people, anyone that suffers racial inequity from the years 1877 to 1965. And then it goes on page 4, section 2, the commission shall examine the types of benefits appropriate for reparations, including official statements of apology, monetary compensation, property tax rebates, social services assistance, licensing and permit fee waivers, reimbursement, down payment assistance for purchases of residential real property, business incentives, child care, debt forgiveness, and higher ed tuition waivers and reimbursement. That's what's in the bill. Now, no bill happens in a silo. Nothing happens by itself. So we need to weigh this against a broader array of policies and what the current state of reality is. And the reality is this chamber, over the last 3 years, we've squandered a $5.5 billion surplus. This chamber raised $2 billion of taxes in the last 2 years, and so many fees that the MVA now offers a payment plan for vehicle registration. Back in the summer, we got our first credit downgrade since 1973. And despite, 3 weeks ago, the news broke that despite having the largest tax increase in Maryland history just 8 months ago, guess what? We're $1.4 billion in the hole. Yet, the party that talks about affordability every day is getting ready to pass a commission set up for race bait handouts. I think that's kind of crazy. This is the year 2025. This bill betrays the original intention, the unifying event of the civil rights movement. It's immoral, and it's a fiscally ruinous to this state. And it sends a message to the generations out there now in Maryland that if you're concerned about fairness, dignity, opportunity in this state, to flee Maryland. I don't think it's right. I'm standing with the governor on this. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Recognizing the young lady from Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
My pleasure.
I'm going to say that again. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
My pleasure. I'm blessed. Thank you for the trust, everyone.
First of all, I want to just remind the body that what we're here to do is not necessarily to debate the bill itself, but to determine if the decision that we made as a body 7 months ago, having had extensive debate and discussion, that this commission, as described in this bill, needs to be stood up, is a decision that we still feel is the right one. We're not really here, in my opinion, to relitigate the arguments. nor are we here to debate the reasons that the governor gave for his veto. Well-meaning people can disagree. We are a legislative body. We went through a deliberative process, and we determined that this is the right thing to do. So I do want to address a couple of the points that have been raised. But first, I want to remind people that this bill essentially does 4 things. It creates the Maryland Reparations Commission to study historic injustices and how they contributed to ongoing systemic disparities. Ongoing, historic. The bill stops looking at around 1965. That sort of corresponds to the official end of the civil rights movement, but I doubt that there's anyone in here in this body who would disagree that the deliberate and harmful actions by state actors here in this state and in this country have continued since then. But we're not looking at that, and there's good reason for that, right? But that puts us in the position of people suggesting that these are bygone times and things of the past that we should just get beyond. It's easy to get beyond things when you're not one of the people who's been despaired. It's easy, okay? But I do appreciate the fact that I think as written, the bill, and I want to really pay tribute to the cross-filer from Baltimore County and the work that she put into this bill. Thank you. To do the best we can to avoid people feeling somehow personally responsible or accountable for what this commission is set to look at. This is not a personal bill. This is a bill that requires us, as an arm of the Maryland government, to look at the things that government policy allowed to happen and enabled. It has long been my belief that we have been misled to believe that the societal problems that the General Assembly is asked to address session after session are problems that are related to failed policy. I don't think that's accurate most of the time. I think that many of the problems we're here to address session after session are actually due to policies that succeeded in doing what they were intended to do. We don't have poverty and desperate poverty because of failed policies. We have continuing policy and generational policy because we had, poverty because we had policies that were designed to keep certain people poor. We don't have uneducated people in the same communities generation and generation because of happenstance of disinvestment. We have it because our policies were designed to keep certain people uneducated, dating back to when it was illegal for an African, before we were citizens, a previously enslaved or freed person of color, a Negro, a colored person, to read. When that was punishable and teaching them was punishable. We don't have disparities in our healthcare system because we had failed policy. Our policies were very deliberate, and they were designed to make sure that some people's health care was addressed and other people's health care was not. And so, as a deliberative body who has a sense of where we've been and where we want to go, it is my belief that it is not just incumbent upon us, it's actually our responsibility to take ownership of the past, of the bills, of the legislation, of the policy that this body has put forth, to look at who it was designed to help and who it was designed to hurt in a cumulative fashion over and over and over and over again, and to see if we can do better. Now, most of you know that I'm a physician, so I'm going to try and explain why I think this is the right bill and this is the veto that we need to override in terms that I understand a little better. If a patient comes to me with a chronic wound, something that just won't heal, and they've been treated before by good practitioners, well-meaning people, smart people who've tried to get that wound to heal, and it's not doing it. There are steps that I have to take if I want to have a different outcome than the people who cared for that wound and that person, that patient before me. The first thing I have to do in seeking an answer is to look at the diagnosis and what the root causes are. I need to know what was the original injury, because it matters. I need to know what was the underlying morbidity. In other words, were there situations that existed before the injury that allowed the injury that you sustained to hurt you in ways that somebody else might not have been hurt? Because things do add up. I need to know if you had pre-existing conditions. Was this wound here before? Did it heal well? Do you have diabetes or high blood pressure? Do you have a circulation problem? Are you carrying a certain degree of stress that makes it difficult for your body to do the work that it's being asked to do? Do you have an underlying autoimmune disease? Has your foundation been rocked? So I have to ask those questions. I can't just look at what someone else did. I can't blame the patient and say, well, you must not be able to heal. Must be something wrong with you. And I need to try and figure out what those previous treatments were and what we might do different. And the other thing I have to look at, in addition to looking at the original injury, the underlying morbidity, the pre-existing conditions, previous treatments, and why they failed, I need to know, is there ongoing trauma? Is it still being hit? Is it still being burned? Is it still being injured? The next thing I have to do after I examine the wound, I need to see if any part of it's been healed. And healing is marked by a scar. Scars don't fade. Scar is a mark of resilience and healing. But we're not talking about scars, we're talking about wounds. And wounds are a sign of an injury that has not been adequately addressed. So then we go into the wound care mode. And sometimes to get a wound to heal, it requires something called debridement, which means that we're going to cut away, sometimes with sharp instruments, those things that are dead, dying, or harmful. It can be a painful process. But if we're not willing to get rid of those things, we don't really expect that wound to ever have a chance of healing. Perhaps in the analogy, those dead, dying things that need to be cut away would be our fears of what we might discover. Our discomfort that actually prevents us from seeing what lies beneath all the debris. And it's also sometimes that we're afraid of the pain that we might have to go through to get to the point where we can see the wound at its root and help it on that process of healing. We have to control the contamination, the infection, what I would say some people would call the stinking thinking. The familiar tropes, the comfortable stereotypes that allow us to say that there's nothing more I can do, this patient just can't heal. Maybe we should amputate because this wound will never heal. So let's just forget about it. You can get by fine with one less limb. But I'm a healer. I'm going to work on that. Then we have to create the conditions that are conducive to healing, the conditions that are conducive to regrowth, the conditions that are conducive to closure. That means adequate oxygen. Sometimes it's hyperbaric oxygen. We got to force the oxygen into the system. I think of that as truth in this analogy. It's the light and the truth. May not be easy to look at, but it's important. We might need to add some nutrients. That's the history that we're talking about. That's the conversation we're having. Those are the nutrients. And we need to protect the wound, which means that we have to approach it, in this analogy, with grace, with respect, with empathy, and with the humility to understand that where we stand is where we stand. And there are other folks standing in other places. And it was said earlier by our colleague, the minority leader, that many of us have done well. Our speaker told you her story, and many of us had done well. But I don't know who I would be. I wouldn't be Ethel and Don's child if I allowed my successes to stop me from seeing, caring, or fighting for those people who haven't been as fortunate. And I don't think there's anyone in this chamber who at their heart would not say the same thing, because you wouldn't be here if you were only fighting for yourself. So we put the protection around it, and then we give it time. And there seems to be a sense in this chamber that the time must not be now. I disagree. The time is now. And the time is now because we are the people who considered this legislation and voted on it 7 months ago. The time is now. We cannot continue to delay doing what we need to do. It is great that we've had policies that were designed to help, but as I stated in the beginning, our policies were also designed to hurt. And if we want to do better, we have to know better. This is the time. This is the vote. And we don't have to deal with all of the U.S. history and all of U.S. problems. As my colleague from Anne Arundel said during the debate that we had in committee, it can be overwhelming to try and do the big things. And that can paralyze us. But this is manageable. This is us. This is Maryland. This is our history. It's our actions. It's our responsibility. And Madam Speaker, I urge the body to override this veto.
Madam Speaker.
I would recognize the young man from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I wanted to rise to oppose the override, and I think I can do it in a way that is in the spirit of the bill. I actually think there's one issue today, and that is the people of this country and the people of this state don't feel that their institutions work for them. And I can't speak on behalf of black Marylanders, but I think that they feel the same thing too. And my problem with this bill is it's actually a distraction from the work ahead of us. I heard today that we need to keep this body about the people. I love it. I hope that's true. I look forward to working with you and everyone else toward that. I want to speak directly to black Marylanders about some policies that are in front of us that I think are germane. How about our failure to address the affordability question for our retirees? Why are we still taxing our elderly as the affordability problem spirals out of control? Do retirees get reparations? No. How about the black children that die in foster care? We know we have massive problems that are manifesting themselves in the actual death of children in the system. Are they going to get reparations under this bill? No. No. How about Marylanders who have died in no-knock warrants? Are they going to get reparations under this bill? No. How about the black Marylanders who have had their prescription drug benefits stolen from them? Will they get reparations? No. And it has nothing to do with the context of this bill. I have learned my role here is to give people an opportunity to do the right thing. And it has nothing to do with what happened 100 years ago. It has everything to do with the fact that the people on this floor won't take action for Marylanders. And what this bill is going to do is distract us from our inability to act and talk about things that have happened at least 60 years ago. They say don't fall in love with your bills, Madam Speaker. I want to talk about a bill I actually really love. Getting rid of retirement income. Think about that. It's something that impacts, or would impact, every single district the same exact way. You keep your grandmom and your grandpop in the district where they were born, where they worked, where they spent their youth, where they grew up, close to their families, close to their jobs, in the communities that they love. What does that have to do with reparations? Absolutely nothing. But instead of taking action for those black Marylanders, we're going to be talking about things that happened 100 years ago. the previous speaker talked about conditions that are conducive. Talking about Maryland history from 150 years ago is a distraction from our lack of action. Those conditions are not conducive to serve black Marylanders or any Marylanders. And that's the real problem with this bill. That's why I'll be a no today.
Recognizing the young man from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and congratulations.
Thank you.
2 decades ago, the United States Senate passed a resolution expressing regret that it did not pass anti-lynching and anti-black racism legislation. They didn't apologize for slavery. They didn't acknowledge the role that institution played in perpetuating this evil system of chattel slavery. But they passed a resolution expressing regret for not passing anti-lynching legislation. And I think that is really emblematic of what we have seen in this country. Everybody talks about we need to be the United States of America and we need unity, while not acknowledging that you cannot have unity without justice, you cannot have justice without truth-telling, and you cannot have truth-telling without courage. And this country, and more specifically this state, has never had the courage to have that uncomfortable conversation, not just about slavery and racism, but the role that it has played and continues to play in every single segment of our society. And we see that play out on this floor and during this debate on whether we should be overriding the governor's veto of the Maryland Reparations Commission. And I will be proudly casting my vote green to override that veto because, as I have reminded some members of this body who didn't know, and those outside of this chamber, that it is here, in this small state, that the institution of slavery, the evils of slavery, and the white supremacist ideology and dogma that comes with that, where it emerged from. Maryland provided the rest of the country with a blueprint on how to not just enact a system that relegates black or African folks to less than, but to codify it into law. It happened in this chamber. In fact, the room next to us is where they passed the doctrine of exclusion of 1638 that said no person of African descent would benefit from the fruits of white society. That's history. So to conveniently talk about civil rights while skipping the hundreds of years and the role that so many people played in propping up an evil system that creates the inequities, that creates the disparities that we see today is disingenuous. Let's talk about the whole picture. This isn't about slavery. Yes, we know the institution of slavery was evil. This is about what we do as a way to repair the harm, the damage, the wounds that were caused for centuries and we still see today. Inequities in healthcare, in housing, where you live, what opportunities you get. We have always taken an ostrich approach in this country when it comes to the issue of racial justice. If we don't acknowledge it, then we don't need to consider ourselves complicit. If we don't pass any legislation addressing it, then we get to go home with a clear conscience. And I'm not sure how much of a clear conscience that is, but we all have a responsibility to right the wrongs of the past. And a wrong occurred in this state and in this country. People who sat where we now sit made a decision that other states began to adopt and later codified, and it was known as the slave codes. This is about repairing that harm. We know about slavery, but what does reparative justice look like? What does it mean to make the individuals who were harmed whole? That's what we are discussing here. And with the Reparations Commission, we're not examining just slavery, we are examining what needs to be done to repair the centuries of harm that was inflicted on people of African descent, both in this state and in this country. No amount of civil rights legislation, no amount of acknowledging what issues that disproportionately impact Black Marylanders is going to change the fact that we need to do something to repair the harm that was done. And so I support overriding this veto because there's always the right time to do the right thing. This should have been done 100 years ago if you ask me. But we're doing it now because it is the right time to do the right thing. And when it comes to Black folks and addressing Black folks, we see progress differently. And too often people measure Black people's progress by where we were and where we are right now. We don't accept that measurement. It is about where we are now and where we ought to have been. And we ought to have had greater equity. We ought to have had funding that is equitable for historically Black colleges and universities. We ought to have a history that we not just acknowledge, but we're willing to do the work of repairing. That's what we're talking about here. So I will be voting to override this veto because I firmly believe that a wrong was done. And instead of pontificating to Black Marylanders in this state or elsewhere, that you should just get over it, or it happened centuries ago, or why aren't we focusing on issues today? And I agree with that sentiment. So I look forward to my Republican colleagues who pointed out all of the inequities that Black Marylanders experience today. I agree. I look forward to watching your vote on the board when some of those legislation come up. I appreciate the minority leader having trust in some of us in this chamber. I hope he will also trust our judgment when we pass this bill, because it was the right thing to do. So we can pretend like this didn't happen and try to deflect with all other issues, but this state gave America the blueprint on slavery. This state should be leading every other state on reparations, but we're not. But today is a day that we can all be proud, because what we're doing is ensuring that we are correcting a historical injustice. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The young man from Southern Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you for waiting.
I rise to sustain the governor's veto of this particular bill. Fact of the matter is yeah, you could have done something 100 years ago because you've been in charge of this legislature for 100 years. Yeah, you have. So where has your party been for the past 100 years when you are actually in charge and have been?
Excuse me, 1 second. Hold on a minute. I know today's my first day, but let me set the rules. When we get up, we're not going to make it personal. Please address the bill, address the subject matter. No disrespect from anyone here. I'm going to run this respectfully, like I run the Health and Government Operations Committee, and many of you have been to my committee. We are not going to make it personal. I understand that this is it is a very emotional bill. It is. So I want you to give it the respect, okay, my friend?
No, I think that's fair.
Thank you. No, please, no. Stick to the issue, please.
I'm going to.
Thank you.
And your party's been in charge for 100 years, and that is true. That's a fact. That's an historical fact.
Please
this could have been done.
Stick with the subject matter. Thank you.
Yes. And the subject matter is Senate Bill 587 from Senator Muse, State Government Maryland Reparations Commission, which was vetoed by the governor, and as I said, I rise to sustain the governor's veto and vote accordingly. And that is because after so many decades of being in charge, the Democrat Party still has this issue where children aren't learning in public schools. Chris Pabst wrote The Failure Factory, and here's the book, How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. 16% of 8th graders in Baltimore City Public Schools, 16% are literate. What kind of future do you have if you grow up in that public school system and you are part of the vast majority who are illiterate? In the book, as a preface, Chris Pabst has a quote from Thomas Sowell. If you want to see the poor remain poor generation after generation, just keep the standards low in schools and make excuses for their academic shortcomings and personal misbehavior. That's definitely personal for the students, personal for all those who aren't learning. And yet, decade after decade after decade, we keep seeing the same results, no matter how much is spent. And so, I rise to support the governor's veto of this bill because it is not the solution. The solution, we all know, is education, and we know the kids aren't being educated. And we ought to be asking that question, why are we doing the same thing year after year, knowing that only 16% of the students are literate? I had someone say to me the other day, Madam Speaker, well, you know, thank goodness for ChatGPT, because that'll certainly solve the problem. The problem with AI is that you still need to know what kind of prompt to put into the AI in order for it to work properly. So if you're illiterate, you won't even know what to say. You won't even be able to read the response. That is the reparation that is needed now more than ever, namely to finally give kids the freedom and the parents the freedom to step away from the bondage of the failed public school system in the state of Maryland and choose a school that works for them. In fact, choose a school where they can actually learn. So for all those reasons, Madam Speaker, I stand with the governor on this bill. Thank you.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
1 second. The young man from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You know, I wanted to stand just to give a slightly different perspective on this, and I prayed long and hard about this one, because this one is difficult for many in the room. There's no question about that. Difficult for lots of reasons. But my family's history is maybe similar to some, maybe different than some. You know, my family came to this country in the 30s. And where did they come from? They came from Poland to escape a country that was implementing systemic racism.
You have not voted?
Sorry, Madam Speaker.
All right,
Sorry,
we're
Madam.
both learning.
Yes,
Go ahead.
sorry, Madam Speaker. I got so excited there. I apologize.
It's okay. You're as excited as I am today. It's okay.
Yes, Madam
I
Speaker.
share the glory.
No, I've got 2 minutes, so I'll be fast. We came to this country to escape systemic racism. And what did we get? What did my family get welcomed with in this country when we came here? They got told, oh, you can't get a loan. You can't live in that neighborhood because you're not the right kind of person. You don't meet the criteria to live there. You can't get money from a bank. And that's what we were welcomed with, right? My family has had no role in this whatsoever. In fact, I would argue that my family has suffered some of the injustices that many in this room have suffered. I'm not saying it's on the same level, but I would say that there are others out here like my family. I'm the first person in my family to go to college, period. My dad's got 11 brothers and sisters. 11 brothers and sisters. I got a lot of cousins. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. My dad's experience was to get health care down at the University of Maryland because that's where it was offered for free. He got haircuts there because that's where it was offered for free. My dad has bad teeth to this day because he didn't have dental care. That was his experience as a family. So what I'm saying with this is that there are some like us, like myself, that have no culpability in this process. I don't believe that my family has any culpability, but I believe that somehow I'm being made, and families like mine are
Your
being made
time
to
is
have
up.
some culpability, and I don't think that's fair.
Your
Yes,
time
Madam
is up.
Speaker.
Thank you, and thank you so much for working with me on this, okay? And that's another thing. If I say your time is up, please be respectful and just, wrap it up. I'm grateful. I'm going to recognize the young men from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker,
My
and
pleasure.
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, members of the House, I rise in support of overriding the governor's veto and explain my vote. I just want to say this is not an act of opposition. It's an act of constitutional defense. Governor Moore and I share the same goal, uplifting all Marylanders and redressing historical harms, and his administration has achieved remarkable progress. But here's the constitutional reality we must confront. Each of those programs is legally vulnerable. The Supreme Court's 2023 decision, Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, made clear that race-conscious government programs must survive strict scrutiny. That is to say that we must have an evidentiary record showing a direct nexus between specific government discrimination and present-day harm. Not general history, not good intentions, specific, documented, quantified evidence. And without it, a federal judge can and will strike down our equity programs as unconstitutional racial preferences. The governor's veto message said, we do not need another study. With respect, the Supreme Court disagrees. This is not academic research, this is constitutional compliance, and Senate Bill 587 creates the legal foundation that the governor's own programs, and many that we pass, need to survive judicial review. It leaves some of our this veto leaves some of the administration's signature achievements exposed to a hostile federal judiciary actively seeking to dismantle state equity programs. Today, in the age of artificial intelligence, we are in position to leverage the vast metadata of Maryland's state archives to achieve and establish these evidentiary connections faster and more precisely than ever before. What once took decades can be done in a few months. This is where we are in the General Assembly, and we must lead. We have the unique constitutional authority to establish the legislative findings and intent. Courts give significant deference to our factual determinations. This is our role, and this is our moment. I urge our colleagues to vote, well, we already did it, to override this veto. And for the legislative record, Madam Speaker, I conclude by saying that
The young man's time is up.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
very much. The young lady from Hartford County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple comments. The good doctor had mentioned how we don't leave patients, we don't tell patients that there's nothing more we can do, but the truth is, for any of you who have lost a family member, actually, we hear all the time that there's nothing more that we can do for a lot of patients in the state of Maryland. My friend from Montgomery County mentioned his displeasure with the Senate for failing to recognize the horrors of slavery, but I have great news. In 2007, the Maryland General Assembly did just that and did publicly apologize for its participation in slavery. Folks, a lot of us are standing with the governor on this veto for partly what he put in his letter, that he felt that it wasn't necessary, that he's made historic contributions to trying to right some of the wrongs of the past for our Black community in Maryland. But additionally, because if our diversity is truly our strength, issues like this are incredibly divisive and harmful to our unity. If you look at the polling on this issue, it consistently polls nationwide around 30%, sometimes lower. Even in the Black community specifically, Pew Research shows that 17% of Black individuals do not support these bills. And it was mentioned earlier that there's a lot of opportunity we have in the state of Maryland by my colleagues from Southern Maryland and from Baltimore County to improve the lives of the very people.
The young lady's time is up.
Thank you, Madam
Thank
Speaker.
you very much. I recognize the young woman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I rise today for the record to state that this is practically impossible and morally wrong. Slavery was and is morally wrong. It was a stain on our nation and our history. It was the cause of a bloody civil war, and it led to the death of at least 700,000 people. It tore families apart, and it tore our nation apart. But reparations is morally wrong, and it will not erase the past. It is practically wrong as well. And for the record, for the commission, I would like them to answer these questions. Who will pay, and who will receive the benefits of reparations? What about Black Americans who came to the USA after the Civil War or after 1965? What about white Americans who came after abolition or after 1965, like my seatmate from Baltimore County? What about Native Americans and Black Americans who owned slaves? Are they recipients or will they pay? What about the tribal chiefs, their descendants from Africa, who sold Black people into slavery to white slavers? What about the families whose great-great-great-great-grandfather was a slave owner and the great-great-great-great-grandmother was a slave? Do they pay or do they receive? What about wealthy dependent descendants of slaves? And what about families like my husband's, whose great-great-great-great-grandfather is on the Gettysburg Memorial in the Pennsylvania militia? He lost his leg in the Civil War, he lost his life, and he left a widow and small children to fend for themselves to free slaves, and it
The young
changed the
lady's time is
course
up.
of his family. For these things, I will be voting red. Thank you, Madam
I
Speaker.
recognize, you're welcome. I recognize the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, this has been a very emotional debate, but I just want to bring you back to some context here. Explain my vote. You can still change it. You still have time. The vote on this was 101 to 36. It was 7 months ago. But the context has changed in that 7 months quite greatly, that many people have reason to change their mind. What has gone on? Well, we've been witnessing a campaign to forget, a campaign of erasure. And outside this room, as we speak, the Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, equal employment opportunities, equal access to a public education, the hallmarks of the civil rights movement are being erased and undone one at a time. The Supreme Court right now has the Voting Rights Act before them, and states in the Deep South have already teed up changes to the election calendar ready to eliminate minority representation throughout the South. That is the context of what is going on today. It is sad to me that there are members of the Assembly who lived through this. It was not long ago. So unfortunately, in 2025, yes, we need to study this, we need to remember it, and we must not forget.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Will anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call.
Madam Speaker?
The vote's already in. There being 93 votes in the affirmative and 35 votes in the negative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 587. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. And thank you, everyone, for being civil and respectful and patient. I really appreciate it. Senate Bill 116, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 116. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 116, Data Center Impact Analysis and Report.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A reminder, a green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk would take the call. There being 109 votes in the affirmative and 21 votes in the negative, the veto is overridden. Thank you. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 116. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. Senate Bill 121, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 121. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 121, Vehicle Laws, Noise Abatement Monitoring Systems, Pilot Program, Inspection and Extension.
The question before the House is, shall bill pass, notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk would take the call. There being 92 votes in the affirmative and 38 votes in the negative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 121. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. Senate Bill 149, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 149. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 149, Climate Change, Adaptation and Mitigation, Total Assessed Cost of Greenhouse Gas Emissions Study and Reports.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk would take the call. There being 94 votes in the affirmative and 36 votes in the negative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 149. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. Senate Bill 157, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 157. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 157, Maryland Disability Service Animal Program, established.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk would take the call. There being 123 votes in the affirmative and 7 votes in the negative, the veto is overridden. Thank you. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 157. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. Senate Bill 168, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 168. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 168, confined aquatic disposal cells, construction moratorium.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive. A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 131 votes in the affirmative and 0 in the negative, the veto is overridden. I was a little surprised about that, sorry. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 168. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. Senate Bill 177, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 177. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 177, Procurement, State Department of Education, Local Food Purchasing Program.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive. A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 126 votes in the affirmative and 5 in the negative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 177. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Senate Bill 455, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 455. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 455, Security Guard Agencies, Special Police Officers, application for appointment.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive. A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 131 votes in the affirmative and 0 in the negative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 455. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. Senate Bill 655, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 655. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 655, Courts Artificial Intelligence Evidence Clinic Pilot Program Establishment.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive. A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 127 votes in the affirmative and 4 in the negative, the veto is overridden. Thank you. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 655. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. Senate Bill 691, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 691. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 691, Healthcare Ecosystem Stakeholder Cybersecurity Work Group.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive. A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 124 votes in the affirmative and 7 votes in the negative, the veto is overridden. Thank you. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 691. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Senate Bill 909, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 909. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 909, Energy Resource Adequacy and Planning Act.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 94 votes in the affirmative and 37 in the negative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto on Senate Bill 909. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Thank you. This ends the work at the desk. I want to take a minute to thank you for giving me the grace to get through the day in a beautiful, respectful way. This is the tone I would like to keep as long as you have me. And I thank you for just giving me your trust and for all the work that you are doing. I know we're going to have a break for the holidays. I hope your holidays, I celebrate Christmas. I hope your holidays are blessed. That please take care of yourself, get some rest, spend time with your families, and then come back. And I know we're going to work really hard. In the interim, please reach me. My phone is the same. All right, if you have any questions or concerns. I'm going to recognize the young man from Baltimore City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and congratulations. Friends, it is my duty to recognize for the last time my first vice chair of my committee, of the Judiciary Committee. Permission to use the delegate's name.
Permission granted.
Delegate Vanessa Atterbury, who is leaving us to go do something in Howard County for some reason, and none of us are quite sure why, but she was the first person who, after I was made a chair, who I got to talk to about the Judiciary Committee, and her questions were everything ranging from, why do you want to do this, to how quickly will you pass my bills? But she came to the work as a partner in the work, and as somebody who fought for her constituents, fought for the people of her district, fought for the people of Howard County, and fought for the people of the state of Maryland. And we partnered on so many different issues, on police reform, on her drunk driving bills that I will never forget, and so many more things. We had a way in those first years of of being the chair and the vice chair, where I really just had to look to my right and I could figure out whether I was crazy about what was going on or not. She and I kind of had that bond. She would tell me when it was appropriate for me and important for me to wear an either pink or green tie. And when it was also important absolutely not to wear one of perhaps 8 other color combinations. I'd say I was going to miss her, but I don't feel like I'm ever going to stop talking to her. But she did an extraordinary job in this chamber, not only as the Vice Chair of Judiciary, but as the Chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And so we will miss you in this room, but we know you'll continue to do great things. Thank you very much for your service to Maryland.
I want to take a minute to express our condolences for the loss of your mom. You know, everyone comes here and you do the work, but everyone has a life and everyone is, you know, goes through a lot of trials and tribulations, and you still come here and do the work. So on behalf of the chamber, we want to express our love to you. You're in our prayers. We're in the middle of Hanukkah, and I would like to recognize the chair of the Jewish Caucus.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
My
and
pleasure.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
We don't often have December sessions, so it's nice to be able to recognize this. So I rise as the co-chair of the Maryland Legislative Jewish Caucus to recognize tonight as the third night of Hanukkah, a holiday that is about celebrating the miracle of a small jar of oil burning for 8 days when it was really only supposed to burn for 1, or just enough to make your entire batch of latkes instead of just 1. The holiday symbolizes light overcoming darkness, faith triumphing over oppression, and finding hope in tough times. This past Sunday, as communities and families across Maryland and around the world gathered to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah, it was hard not to think about the horrific acts of hatred, violence, and darkness in Sydney, Australia, where 15 people were gunned down in cold blood. I want to thank many of you for your kind words and your words of support and outreach. We stand to honor those victims, those individuals who lost their lives simply because they were trying to practice an act of faith and celebrate their religion. May this tragedy make us all redouble our efforts to heal the world, and may the memories of those who were lost always be a blessing. And wanted to just wish you all a happy Hanukkah, and I hope the holiday season brings you much light in your life. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you so much for that message. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we propose with your concurrence that when the General Assembly adjourns December 16, 2025, it stands adjourned sine die.
Oops, sorry about that. Too eager.
We further propose the appointment of a joint committee, 2 on the part of the Senate and 2 on the part of the House, to wait upon His Excellency the Governor of Maryland to inform him that the General Assembly will adjourn sine die in accordance with the provisions of our Constitution, and to inquire if he has any further communications to make to the General Assembly. We have appointed on the part of the House delegates Moon and Buckle.
All right, I go now. Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House delegates, we have received your message proposing that when the General Assembly adjourns December 16, 2025, it stands adjourned sine die. The Senate concurs therein. We agree to the joint committee to wait upon His Excellency the Honorable Wes Moore, Governor of Maryland. The Senate appoints Senator King and Hershey. By order, Nicole M. Zanders, Secretary of the Senate.
Hearing no objection, the message is ordered journalized. Corin Cole, before sine die.
Madam Speaker?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Recognizing the young lady from Southern Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Before we leave, I just want to stand on behalf of the members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority and members of the Links Incorporated to wish congratulations or farewell to the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and permission to use the delegate's name.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Vanessa Atterbury. I'm going to ask the members of the sorority as well as the links to please stand, because this is our comment to you. We recognize the fact that the organizations of both groups recognize women who are professionals, recognize women who are committed to service, recognize women who are decision makers, opinion seekers, those who are family oriented, those women who display courage, legacy, and most of all, role models who make a difference in the local as well as the nation. This is our delegate, Atterbury. We wish her the very best, and we appreciate all the service that you've done for your advocacy, for your strong stance, and we know that you will do the best in your next venture. All the very best to you.
Has everyone recorded their presence? The clerk would take the call. There being 128 members present, the House is still in session. Recognize the Majority Leader.
Congratulations one more time, Madam Speaker.
Thank
but
you
I
so
move
much.
that the House stands adjourned, sine die.